We'd only been in the house for about 2 weeks when he showed up. My husband and I had just finished unpacking the last of our boxes. I remember sitting on the floor between two half-assembled bookshelves, covered in dust, trying to figure out where the heck we'd packed the HDMI cable. We were tired, sore, but happy. There was something satisfying about finally seeing your stuff in the right place, like each piece had found its home. I was finally settling into a routine. Waking up early to prep lesson plans, drinking coffee on the porch while the morning sun hit the tops of the neighbors' palm trees. The neighborhood was calm. Not just quiet, but calm in a way that made me realize how tense I'd been living in the city. Like my body was just now remembering what it felt like to unclench. We took walks in the evening, slow ones, with no destination. Just exploring. The streets were lined with jacarandas and well-tended yards. People watered their lawns, waved as we passed. We smiled back. It was all so normal. So different from the apartment we'd been in before. No sirens in the middle of the night. No stomping from upstairs neighbors. No constant city buzz. Just quiet. I loved it. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon. I remember because I had a staff meeting that ran long, and I got home just before sunset. The sky was that soft gold color that only lasts for a few minutes. I kicked my shoes off, tossed my bag onto the bench in the entryway, and barely made it to the kitchen when the doorbell rang. My husband was still at work, so I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked to the door. A man stood there, mid-40s, clean cut, wearing jeans and a plain white t-shirt. He looked normal, average build, neatly trimmed facial hair, no wild look in his eyes. He smiled, polite, practiced, and asked, "Is Casey home?" It took me a second to process. I definitely wasn't expecting that. "I'm sorry," I said. "There's no Casey here. We just moved in." He lost his smile for a split second. Just the briefest flicker. Then it was back. "All right. Sorry to bother you." He turned and walked away, hands in his pockets. Slow, but not hesitant. No sign of second thoughts. No glance back. I watched him go, thinking maybe he had the wrong address. That happens, right? Maybe Casey lived here before us. That Friday, he came back. I recognized him right away. Same clothes. Same polite expression. He didn't knock this time, just rang the bell once and waited. "I'm looking for Casey," he said again. His voice was firmer this time, like he was correcting me. "She's expecting me." I gave him a confused look. "We just moved in about 2 weeks ago," I told him. "I don't know anyone named Casey." His expression didn't change, but he angled his head toward the house, like he was trying to hear something inside. Like he didn't believe me. "That's strange," he said. "I just spoke to her." "When?" I asked, squinting at him. "Not long ago," he said. Vague. Casual. Like it wasn't a big deal. He gave a small shrug and walked off again. Slower this time. Like he was making a point. That night, I brought it up with my husband while we sat on the couch. A rerun of some cooking show played in the background. He frowned, arms crossed. "If he shows up again," he said, "I'll talk to him." 3 days later, he did come back. This time, my husband answered the door. He didn't raise his voice, didn't shout, but his posture was stiff. I could tell he was trying not to let his hackles rise. "I don't know who Casey is," he told the man, "but you need to stop coming around here." The man just stood there, silent. No apology, no smile, just a blank stare. Eyes fixed on my husband's face like he was memorizing it. "Right?" he said finally. Then he turned and walked away. We figured that was the end of it. It wasn't. About a week later, I noticed a car parked across the street. Same time every night, around 9 o'clock. Lights off, engine off, just a figure in the driver's seat. The first night I thought it was nothing. Maybe someone waiting for a ride. Happens all the time. But the next night, it was there again. And again the night after that. Always the same car. Dark sedan. Tinted windows. No movement. One night, I stood at the upstairs window for 20 minutes. Just watching. The figure never moved. Didn't smoke. Didn't check their phone. Just sat there. I mentioned it to my husband. He said he hadn't noticed. But after that, I could tell he started looking out the windows more often. A few days later, I went outside to water the plants around sunset. As I passed the side yard, the motion light flicked on. There was nothing there. No wind. No raccoons. Just the sharp click of the bulb warming up and casting shadows across the fence. Then another night, we found the back gate wide open. My husband swore he'd locked it earlier that day. We checked the fence line. No obvious damage. No sign someone had forced their way in. Just an open gate, and that same eerie stillness. I couldn't relax anymore. I stopped sitting on the porch. I kept the curtains drawn all day. I started sleeping with the bedroom door locked, even though my husband was home. I filed a non-emergency report online. Took a few days to get a response. The officer on the phone was polite, but not exactly concerned. Probably a misunderstanding, he said. Maybe a delivery driver. Maybe someone looking for a friend who used to live there. We'll send someone by now and then. It didn't help. Then one Thursday night, I was home alone, grading papers at the dining room table. My husband was working late, covering for someone at the hospital. I had my laptop open, half a sandwich on the plate beside me. I was halfway through a student essay on Romeo and Juliet when the doorbell rang. It was just after 9:30. I stood up, slow, careful. The house was quiet. The hallway to the front door was dark. I turned on the porch light before stepping closer, waited a beat, then opened the door just a crack. No one was there. I stepped onto the porch, just far enough to look around. That's when I saw it. Mud, tracked across the welcome mat. Thin streaks of it, and footprints. Just one set. They didn't go back down the path. They veered off toward the side yard. I shut the door and locked it. Every deadbolt, every chain. Then I called my husband, whispering into the phone as I locked myself in the downstairs bathroom. He stayed on the line with me, told me to breathe, told me to stay quiet, told me to call the police. I did. 20 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. They walked the yard, checked the fence line, looked around the porch. No sign of anyone. But one officer stayed behind and asked me what the man looked like. I described him as best I could. He nodded slowly. "I think I know who that is," he said. "Used to live here. Got evicted after some issues." "What kind of issues?" I asked. He hesitated. "Nothing I can say officially. But if he shows up again, don't open the door. Just call us." When my husband got home, we searched the entire house together. Room by room. Nothing missing. No broken windows. But something felt off. Like whoever had been here wasn't trying to get in. They just wanted us to know they were still around. Later that week, I pulled out our home purchase paperwork. I combed through it. Nowhere in the documents was the name Casey. Just the seller. But that name had burned itself into my mind like a scar. I moved into the house in July 2020, right in the thick of lockdown. Everything was weird back then. The streets were empty. The world felt like it was holding its breath. And even though we were all isolated, I felt like I needed to be even more alone. I just ended a long-term relationship that should have been over months earlier. Work had gone fully remote, and the lease on my apartment was up. I didn't want to renew it. I didn't want to stay in the same space where everything had unraveled. So I left. Eugene had this laid-back, quiet vibe. Affordable. Full of trees and trails. It felt like a place you could disappear into without disappearing completely. And I figured if I was going to be stuck somewhere rebuilding my life from the ground up, I might as well pick a place where I could actually breathe again. The house I found was a 1930s craftsman bungalow just outside the university district. It looked charming online, and honestly in person it wasn't bad either. 2 bedrooms, original hardwood floors, tall windows that made every room glow around 3 p.m., and a porch that wrapped around the front and one side like something out of a postcard. The porch looked great in the photos. In reality, a few of the boards were soft and rotting. It needed a good pressure wash, but I didn't care. It was mine, or mine to rent at least, and it was peaceful. I thought, I'll stay here for a year, maybe 2, reset everything, get my life back on track. That was the plan. There was just one thing I didn't like. The attic. More specifically, the attic door. It was in the hallway ceiling. One of those square panels with a dangling pull string. And from day one, it never sat fully shut. It always sagged a little at the edge, like it hadn't been latched all the way. I figured it was warped wood. Old houses always have their quirks, right? But what really stood out was the temperature. I'd walk down the hall and feel it, like walking into a pocket of air from a different climate zone. The rest of the house would be cool, sometimes even chilly at night. But right under that attic hatch, it was warm, uncomfortably warm. And not just heat. It was moist, like someone had just stepped out of a hot shower and left the door open. It clung to your skin, made your shirt stick to your back, and it didn't go away. The first night I remember walking under it and stopping because I felt it on my neck. Like warm breath. Not a draft. Breath. I kept the thermostat low, had a ceiling fan running in the bedroom, cracked windows at night. Circulation didn't matter. That hallway was always the same, humid and still. I told myself it was just poor insulation. That made sense, right? Maybe the attic trapped heat and moisture. Maybe the roof was absorbing too much sun. That's what I do when things feel off. I try to explain them, rationalize them, tuck them into a box labeled normal. But the attic door stayed slightly ajar. Never open. Just not closed. And I found myself checking it more often than I wanted to admit. I'd look up on the way to the bathroom, on the way to bed, just to make sure it hadn't moved, that it wasn't wider than the day before. Then little things started happening. Things that wouldn't normally bother me, but stacked together, they got under my skin. The first time, it was the cereal box. I always keep it in the cabinet. Top shelf. Left side. But I found it sitting on top of the fridge. Twice. I thought maybe I was distracted. Maybe I put it there and forgot. I was tired. Stressed. Sure. That made sense. But then the fridge door started showing up slightly open in the mornings. Not wide. Just enough that the light inside was on. Like someone had opened it, stared for a second, then forgot to close it all the way. I live alone. Always have. And I'm borderline obsessive about small details. I line up my keys on the tray by the door. I fold towels a specific way. I notice things. So seeing the fridge slightly ajar, that didn't sit right. A few days later, I noticed my sneakers by the front door were turned around. Not shifted. Not kicked to the side. Completely turned around. As if someone had picked them up and placed them back, facing the wall. I hadn't even worn them that day. That's when I started taking pictures. Not because I thought I'd catch something. Just so I could compare. So I could prove to myself that I wasn't imagining it. I'd snap a quick shot before bed. The shoes. The keys. The cereal box. How the blinds were tilted. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to sound crazy. But I needed to know. A week later, lying in bed around 2:30 in the morning, I was half asleep, scrolling through Twitter. Everything was quiet. No wind. No traffic. Then, clear as day, I heard it. A cough. Short. Dry. Like someone clearing their throat. And it came from directly above me. There's nothing above me. Just the attic. I sat up. My phone slipped out of my hand and hit the blanket. I didn't move. Just stared at the ceiling. I waited for footsteps. Movement. Anything. But it stayed quiet. I didn't sleep that night. Just laid there. Listening. The next day, I called my buddy Josh. I didn't tell him everything. Just that I thought someone might be messing with me. He laughed. You probably got a possum up there, man. Or an attic goblin. Beat it with peanut butter. Make peace. I laughed too. But not really. I couldn't let it go. I started reading stories. Articles. Reddit threads. People finding squatters in their attics or walls. Turns out, it happens more than you think. Sometimes for weeks. Sometimes longer. I knew I had to check. So the next afternoon, I grabbed a flashlight, a broom handle, and a kitchen knife. Just in case. I pulled down the ladder and opened the hatch. The heat hit me like a wall. Thicker than ever. The smell was worse now, like body odor and garbage. Damp and heavy. I climbed a few rungs and shined the light around. It was empty. No furniture. No boxes. Just exposed beams, fiberglass insulation, and dust. But the air felt used. Like it had been breathed. I didn't go all the way up. I told myself I didn't need to. I'd seen enough. That night, I set my phone up on a tripod and aimed it at the attic door. I hit record, left the hallway light on, and tried to sleep. Every creak in the house made my skin crawl. The next morning, I checked the footage. 6 hours of mostly nothing. I scrubbed through it frame by frame. Then, at 3:47 a.m., it happened. The attic door shifted. Just a little wobble. Then it opened. Slow. Controlled. No sound. A bare foot emerged. Then a hand. Gripping the frame. A thin figure lowered themselves down the ladder. No shoes. Pale skin. I couldn't see the face. The hallway light was behind them, so the figure was just a silhouette. But I could see the shape. Gaunt. Careful. They stepped off screen. I paused the video. Just sat there. Then I ran to the kitchen and threw up. I called the police. They arrived fast. 2 officers. I showed them the footage. One of them raised his eyebrows. The other asked if I'd searched the attic. They went up with flashlights and gloves. 10 minutes later, one called the other over. They found a rolled-up foam mattress. an empty peanut butter jar, 2 water bottles, and a spiral notebook. The notebook was filled with drawings. All of me, in pencil, rough sketches from odd angles, through windows, from above, from behind the couch. One showed me eating at the dining table. Another, me watching TV. Another, me sleeping. I bought the house with the kind of excitement you only get when you think you've finally cracked the code. It was supposed to be my first real flip. Something I'd live in for a while, fix up slowly, and eventually sell at a decent profit. A transitional space. Not forever. Just something between where I was and where I wanted to be. It looked perfect from the outside. Mid-century charm, red brick with ivy climbing up one side, a big oak tree in the front yard that dropped leaves like confetti every time the wind picked up. It was the kind of house that made people nod and say, "You've got good taste." Inside, it was older, creaky in places, but nothing I hadn't dealt with before. I've walked through houses with floors that buckled like waves and ceilings that sagged like wet canvas. This one just had character. Hardwood floors, original trim, a fireplace that worked, a sunroom that glowed in the afternoons like it had its own internal clock. I moved in the first week of October. Crisp mornings, golden light, sweater weather, the kind of autumn you want to bottle. I spent the first few days painting the kitchen cabinets and mapping out where I'd start renovations once my next commission check cleared. It was a quiet rhythm, paint, podcasts, sandwiches eaten standing up. It wasn't until week 2 that I noticed the hatch. It was in the hallway closet, under a loose board that shifted every time I stepped into the space. I'd been storing cleaning supplies in there and kept feeling this weird, uneven tilt under my feet, like one side of the floor gently bowed inward. One day, I pulled everything out, rolled up my sleeves, and lifted the board. Underneath was a square of wood, painted the same color as the floor. No hinges, no handle. It was flush with the rest of the boards, but not nailed down. Someone had gone through the trouble of making it disappear. That night, I grabbed a crowbar from the garage and pried it open. It made a sound I'll never forget, like the house exhaled. Dust flew into my face, thick and powdery, and I coughed until my eyes watered. I pointed my flashlight into the dark and saw steps. Not stairs. Steps. Narrow, uneven boards leading down into a crawlspace. I should have waited until daylight, but curiosity has always been my worst trait. I stepped down. The air shifted. It was cooler. Not cold. Smelled like mildew and something waxy. The space wasn't what I expected. It was bigger. Deeper. I could stand up without hunching over. The floor was mostly dirt, but someone had laid down old boards across the center, forming a kind of platform. On it, dozens of candle stubs. Short. Burned down. Melted into the wood. Arranged in a near-perfect circle. At the center was a pile of dried flower petals. Scattered around them were clippings of hair. Some long, some short. And just beyond that, barely visible under a layer of dust, was a Polaroid photo. I bent down, picked it up, brushed it off. It was the living room. The same living room I'd just been sitting in. The photo looked old, faded and yellowed, but the furniture layout was identical to mine. I hadn't copied anything from the previous owner. I hadn't even seen the listing photos until after I moved in. In the picture, someone was standing in the center of the frame, wearing a mask. Not a Halloween mask. Not something store-bought. This looked homemade. Like papier-mâché over burlap. Hollow black eye holes. No mouth. Just blank. I backed up, left the crawlspace open, went upstairs. I sat on the couch and stared at the photo for a long time. Eventually, I slid it into a drawer in the kitchen and told myself it was just some weird leftover from a previous owner. A prank, maybe. A prop. The next day, my dog, his name's Baltaz, started acting off. He's a rescue. Not super reactive, but he has good instincts. He sniffed the closet door, then whined, then wouldn't go near it again. I called his name. Tried to coax him over with a treat. He backed away. Went to lie on the far end of the couch. Wouldn't even look toward the hallway. That's when I started to feel like maybe something was off. Over the next few days, I caught a faint smell coming from the closet. It reminded me of birthday candles after they've been blown out, mixed with wet leaves. Paint, but it was consistent, lingering. I thought maybe I'd stirred up mold. But when I checked again, there was nothing visibly growing. The crawlspace looked exactly the same. I told myself to let it go. Old houses have smells. But every night, I thought about that photo. A week later, I was watching TV in the sunroom. Baltaz was asleep next to me. I got up to get water from the kitchen, and when I came back, the photo was on the counter. The one from the crawlspace. I hadn't taken it out. No one else had keys. I didn't touch it. I grabbed Baltaz, went to my room, and locked the door. The next day, I called a contractor friend of mine. His name's Lennox, one of those guys who's seen everything, nothing phases him. I told him I needed someone to look at a weird space under the house. He came over that afternoon. I walked him through what I'd found. He didn't say much, just nodded, crouched down, and climbed into the crawl space with a big utility flashlight. A few minutes passed, then a few more. I called down to him. No answer. I was just about to grab the second flashlight from the garage when I heard his voice. "You should come look at this." I stepped down carefully. Lennox was standing near the far wall, staring at the wood beams. There were scratch marks. Deep ones. Not random. Repeated. Parallel lines etched into the support beams. Some of them forming crude shapes, circles, XS, a few symbols I didn't recognize. He didn't say anything. Just turned to look at me. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept every light in the house on. Baltaz wouldn't leave my side. At one point, around 2 a.m., I heard a soft creak, like the floorboard in the hallway outside my door. I didn't check. I just sat there, wide awake, gripping the flashlight. I sealed the crawl space the next morning, cut new boards, nailed them in, painted over it, moved a heavy dresser on top, and I listed the house. I didn't tell the agent about what I found. I know that's probably wrong, but I needed to be done with it. A few weeks later, I was showing a completely different property on the other side of town. Bright, modern, open floor plan, zero history, just drywall and engineered floors. As sterile as it gets. As I was locking up, my phone buzzed. Security alert. From the smart cameras I forgot I hadn't deactivated at the old house. Motion detected. I got into my car and opened my laptop. Logged into the feed. My heart was pounding. The footage was glitchy. Jumpy. But I saw it. Clear as day. A shadow. Not from outside. From within. The camera caught a figure. Not a person, not exactly. Just the faint outline of something. It moved toward the crawl space. And then just before the feed cut to black, it disappeared. I slammed my laptop shut. Too freaked out to even think about hitting record. I didn't go back. Not to check. Not to confirm. Not even for closure. Some houses don't want to be flipped. Some houses flip you. I bought the house after a promotion. My first real one. The kind that comes with its own office, a shiny new title, and a pay bump big enough to finally stop sharing walls with strangers. No more upstairs stomping at 2 a.m., no more mystery leaks from the apartment above. The house was a reward to myself. A gorgeous little historic place in one of Richmond's older neighborhoods, tucked between two sycamore-lined streets, with brick sidewalks and front porches that had seen generations come and go. It felt earned. I'd been working toward this for years. Long hours, endless case files, late nights prepping depositions and trial briefs. The kind of grind that makes you forget to eat, or sleep, or call your mom back. But it finally paid off. And this house felt like a physical marker of everything I'd done right. I was single, financially stable, and finally living somewhere I could call my own without feeling like I was squatting in some beige rental built in 1994. I moved in mid-October. The leaves were just starting to turn. The air had that dry, smoky bite to it. And for once, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. It was quiet, mostly older folks and a few families. The kind of place where everyone waves when they walk their dog and says things like, "Let me know if you need anything." The day after I moved in, I was unpacking plates in the kitchen when the doorbell rang. It was a woman, maybe early 60s, holding a Tupperware of cookies. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said brightly. "I'm Wenda from next door." She pointed to the yellow house on my right. It had one of those perfectly trimmed hedges and a porch swing that didn't look like it had moved in years. She seemed sweet. Chipper in that way older women sometimes are when they've lived on the same street for decades. We made small talk for a few minutes. I thanked her for the cookies. She lingered a bit, glancing around the living room, almost like she was taking inventory. Then she said something that stuck with me. "You kept the rug, I see. That's nice. It suits the room." I blinked. I hadn't kept the rug. It came with the staging. I had my own, gray and blue, not the burnt orange and cream one she was talking about. But the staging rug and mine were similar. Maybe that's all it was. Coincidence. Then she mentioned the window treatments. Those green curtains upstairs do such a good job blocking the light, she said. I always thought they were underrated. I hadn't told her which bedroom I was using, and I hadn't even opened those curtains since I moved in. I figured maybe she'd been friends with the last owner. Maybe she helped with the sale. Or maybe she was just unusually observant. Nothing to be weird about, right? A week went by, then another. I was still settling in, hanging art, finding new routines, figuring out the best takeout nearby. My life had become a blur of client calls and half-eaten leftovers. I'd come home late, eat on the couch, watch something mindless. Try not to think about deadlines. And I kept seeing Wenda, always in her window. Morning, night. It didn't seem to matter. She was just there. Sometimes she'd wave. Sometimes she wouldn't. One time, I waved first. She didn't respond. Just stared. Still. Eyes locked. It was like waving at a mannequin. Then things got weirder. I got a piece of mail addressed to me, but the name was misspelled. Not in a random way. Not like a typo. It was misspelled in the way someone would spell it if they'd only ever heard it. Like they were going off pronunciation, not spelling. The envelope wasn't handwritten. It was typed. Cheap paper. No return address. Inside? A real estate flyer. Nothing else. Another time, I came home from work and found a folded piece of paper tucked into my mailbox. No envelope. No name. Just a single line. You look better than the last girl. No signature. That one stuck with me. I tried to write it off. Maybe it was some kind of prank. Or old neighborhood gossip. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. Not all the time. Just enough to make you feel exposed. Wenda never said anything inappropriate. Never came onto my property. Never crossed a line I could point to. But the energy? It was wrong. It was in the way she looked at me. Too long. Too still. Like she was always waiting for something. Once, I caught her standing at her window at 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep. Walked to the kitchen for water. Just happened to glance through the blinds. There she was. Lights off. Just her pale silhouette, framed in the glass. I mentioned it in passing to a colleague over lunch. She raised an eyebrow and told me to get a camera system. Just in case. I bought one that night. Then I called a friend from law school, Rohin, who'd gone into cybersecurity. Told him everything. Asked him, half joking and half panicked, to sweep the place. He came by a few days later with a handheld detector. We checked the living room, kitchen, bathroom, then the bedroom. Got something, he said. He pointed the device at the air vent above my bed. Inside was a tiny camera. I couldn't even see it until he shined a flashlight. No bigger than a screw head. Silent. Wired to nothing obvious. I reported it immediately. The police came. Took statements. Filed a report. I gave them everything, the note, the footage from my new cameras. Which, at that point, only showed Wenda standing at her window. Always at the window. They got a warrant. When they searched her house, they found dozens of printed photos. All of me. Labeled. Dated. Me watering the plants. Me watching TV. Me eating dinner. Me sleeping. There was a list, too. Titled, What She Does and When. It had times. Notes. 7:15 a.m., shower. 9:30 p.m., sits on left side of couch. Tuesday, takes trash out. The police said the previous owners had filed a complaint too. But nothing stuck. No hard proof. Apparently it had been dismissed. Wenda didn't deny anything. But she didn't explain it either. She just said she liked to keep track of the neighborhood. That she had a good memory for details. That she never meant harm. No charges were filed. There wasn't enough. Nothing that met the threshold. I installed blackout curtains. Changed the locks. Moved the bed to the opposite wall. Wenda never spoke to me again. But every night I'd see her face in the window. Not moving. Not blinking. Just watching. It wasn't the house that felt unsafe. It was the space between the blinds.